Great. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about how we actually go around funding things, just super quickly. So when I turned up at ARIA, my kind of task was to define what we call an opportunity space. So an opportunity space is a broad area that we believe is important, if true, can build new capabilities for society, but is underexplored relative to potential impact. Okay, so for example, my opportunity space is around scalable neural interfaces. How do we deliver new types of technologies, neurotechnologies, at scale? So within that broad opportunity space, we then define a program. So if you're familiar with an organization like DARPA, they also have programs such as Welcome Leap. And a program is really, the goal here, it sounds a little bit corny to say it, but I love this idea of changing the perception of what's possible. Can we take things that beforehand, people would just say, no, I don't believe it's true. And by the end, we've kind of de-risked it enough where people are like, yeah, maybe this is a thing. And that will lead to follow-on funding, companies, many different, next generation uses of that technology. And another critical part is we're looking to set up programs that are unlikely to happen without ARIA. So, and another cool part is that we actually publish all of these opportunity spaces. You can actually go and see these documents. I'll flash up some images later. You either love them or you hate them. They're like hand drawn. They've got like pictures everywhere. I think they're kind of cool. So that's the program, and we launch these programs publicly, and people can apply to them. And within that, we then fund teams. So when we're selecting the projects, we're really doing this in a way, and they're very focused, mission-driven efforts with concrete metrics and milestones, really with the goal of driving technological innovation. And once we select these projects are actively managed by the program director. So a program is around £50 million over the course of 3 to 5 years, really just trying to turn the dial in a particular area. So in terms of active management, the team and myself will meet with all of the people that are funding, we'll get updates, and if areas are looking really promising and really exciting, we can actually divert more funding towards it. If things aren't working, we can work with our teams to pivot, and if things still aren't working, we can actually terminate programs. And the way we've been set up, if all of the things we fund are just wildly successful, we're not doing our job. We're not selecting projects that are ambitious enough. Okay, so that's really where we're trying to sit. Outside of the program, we can also fund what we call opportunity seeds. These are smaller pots of money. And I'm going to not talk about this at the moment because Gillian's going to talk about it at the end. But just to say and flag now that we're likely going to have one of these calls coming either end of this year, early next year. And you bring all these together and you have technological breakthroughs, you start new communities and new capital inflows and hopefully large-scale technical transformation. That's really the goal of ARIA. So super quickly, I'm just going to talk about some of the other programs that we're running, just so you have an idea of the kind of spectrum of things we're doing. I guess critically, we don't have a specific technological area. And that's kind of exciting because you can actually look for synergies between different fields. So we have a program in programmable plants. Can you use the tools from synthetic biology to actually create artificial plants? And can you use those, for example, for new types of crops or vaccines or medicines? I'm going to talk about my program. We have one on mathematics for safe AI. Can we develop new kinds of mathematical languages that actually allow us to guarantee the safety of frontier AI models? And can we actually deploy them in relevant places? We have a program in robotics. Can we develop new types of robots which are actually highly dexterous and which can solve many of the challenges that we're going to face with an aging population? We have one program in next generation computing hardware. Can we borrow principles from nature to actually build highly fast, low power, next generation computing systems? And then we have two programs in the climate space. Can we actually monitor the climate in such a way that we can predict if there's going to be a nonlinear tipping point. And the second program is, if we can see that, can we actively change that? Can we actively cool down the environment as a last-ditch attempt if we have nothing else that we can use? So, okay, that's just an overview, just to kind of give you a kind of high level of the types of things we're doing at ARIA. Just really quickly, how did I end up here? So, you know, as was mentioned earlier, my background is I'm not a biologist by training. I actually don't have, I kind of stopped at high school. So my background was in applied physics. So I spent about a decade building next generation computing systems. So what you can see here is a photonic computer. So it's a silicon chip that's about 1 centimeter in length. And these things are wire bonds, and light goes from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. And by programming these electronics, you can actually change how the light moves through the chip and actually perform different kinds of computation. So I was particularly looking at this for applications in AI and quantum computing. And while I really loved working in this area, it became increasingly clear I wanted to work on problems that were more directly related to human health. So a few years ago, I then pivoted into systems neuroscience. So this is an image that might be familiar to some of the folks here. This is a 2-photon image of a, actually, does anyone know what brain region this might be? I'm kind of curious. So this is a mouse cerebellum. So these kind of donuts, the image is quite small, so I won't hold it against you. These donuts are Purkinje cells. And they are the main output of the cerebellum. They're expressing what's called an activity indicator, a voltage indicator. So when the voltage across the membrane of that cell changes, the fluorescence changes. You have a way to read out the activity of the animal. And when I made that jump into neuroscience, I was really struck by the gap between the technologies that we were using in fields like applied physics and the technologies we were using in fields like neuroscience. To be honest, it was just a huge gap. So I kind of became obsessed with this question. If we could close this gap, what new kinds of therapeutics might we be able to develop? And that was really the genesis of how I ended up joining ARIA, to get at this question. How can we apply principles from physics, engineering, and biology to help understand and repair the human brain? And I would say the thing that kind of really gets me out of bed every day is, is this slide and these facts, which is that brain disorders, so neurological, neuropsychiatric disorders, are really the cause of an overwhelming social and economic impact. Okay? So just look at the numbers, right? Brain disorders are estimated to cost the UK about £100 billion a year. That's both direct costs, to medical costs, and indirect costs due to losses of earnings. That's estimated to globally account for 21% of the global disease burden versus 7% for heart disease. Okay? So those numbers are really big, right? But if you just actually look at the most, the most prevalent brain disorders, this is in Europe, we have things like anxiety disorders, mood disorders, addiction, dementia, psychosis, epilepsy, stroke. These are things that maybe you know people who have experience with, or you have experience with them yourself. Okay, so really the social impact of this is huge. And typically, we look towards small molecule pharmaceuticals to help us out here. But over the past 50 years or so, we've seen a significant decrease in the R&D efficiency of drug discovery. Okay? And you can see that if you just plot the number of drugs developed per $1 billion as a function of time. You see this significant drop-off. Okay? And that's particularly acute for the brain sciences for 2 reasons. One, we have the blood-brain barrier, and getting small molecules to cross that is really hard. And 2, even if you can cross it, knowing what to target and how to target it is just super challenging because the brain is so complex. So the question is, what cause for optimism do we have? I think in the past decade, probably more, it's become increasingly clear that targeted interaction with the human nervous system can improve the human condition across an incredibly wide range of disease states and cognitive domains. And I think a great existence proof here, and let's see if this video is going to work. is deep brain stimulation for movement disorders such as Parkinson's or essential tremor. So I'll play this video and see if it works. Okay, so on the left, you can see someone with Parkinson's, and what they've done is implanted a deep brain stimulator. It's about 1 millimeter in diameter. You plant it down into the deep brain region, typically the basal ganglia, and you provide high-frequency electrical stimulation. And what that essentially does, if you look on the left-hand side, you can see you're doing some movement tasks with the stimulator turned off, and on the right-hand side, when the stimulator is turned on, you can really see it helps suppress those tremors. So that's this technology is incredible. It's probably been FDA approved for about 20, 25 years now. But for me, one of the most exciting parts is this table. So this is a table of ongoing clinical trials with deep brain stimulators. And I just highlighted some of the conditions that are being targeted. We've got things like major depressive disorder, bipolar, schizophrenia, addiction, psychosis, Alzheimer's, dementia, traumatic brain injury. Okay, so these are really early studies, just N of a few. But if this is true, the kind of potential for these types of neurotechnologies is really huge. So if there's kind of one message I want you to take away from this talk, is this, that we hear a lot about companies that are developing motor brain-computer interfaces, companies like Neuralink and others. And without a doubt, these technologies are incredible and they're going to help people. I don't doubt that that's going to happen. But if we think about brain disorders more broadly, actually the patient population is just so much larger. And that's really, when we think about neurotechnologies, in my eyes, that's really the broad population we should be targeting. So the huge potential for neurotechnologies is really what I want to try and get across. Yes, okay. And another area that's just incredibly exciting at the moment, I don't know if the sound is going to play. So let's just try it out. Let's see.
and then do you want to, wherever this is?
That's fine, I'll go there. Yeah, sorry the audio wasn't great on that. Hopefully that kind of gave you the essence. I think that is just an area that is so exciting and moving so quickly at the moment. You know, the fact that you can translate brain signals into speech. What's really remarkable with this study, so if anyone's interested in this, the lead authors, Sergei Stavisky, should definitely check out this paper, New England Journal of Medicine, I think this year. What's most remarkable is that they can translate brain signals to speech at with an error rate of less than 1% over a vocabulary of 125,000 words. Like really, really remarkable, basically in real time. Okay, so there are just so many incredible things happening now in the neurotechnology space. So given all of this incredible breakthroughs, all these incredible advances, why is ARIA doing something here? So this kind of gets at the beginning of the opportunity space. So the UK currently performs about 400 DBS surgeries per year. Okay. And there's many reasons that go into that low number, right? There are, you know, there's patient and clinician hesitancy, there's the cost of these things, it requires huge amounts of resources, months of pre-op care, post-op care, stimulator tuning. So if we really believe this technology can be hugely impactful, we need to come up with new ways to actually deliver these therapeutics at scale. Okay. So that was really the kind of first challenge that we identified in this opportunity space. So yeah, this is the document. This is the opportunity space I was talking about. You can go and look at that. You can go on a website and check it out. But this was really the first challenge, this challenge of scale. So what I wanted to do is just kind of give you an example of one interesting area that potentially might be able to increase the throughput of these types of studies, you know, actually deliver them in the clinic. Yeah, and also in terms of, you know, we saw this kind of brain to text generation. We've never had an implanted BCI like that in the UK. Okay, so there's a real challenge to actually scale that up. So yeah, the challenge is how do we rapidly and safely increase the throughput which these technologies can be deployed. So this is another video, just shorter. Okay, can read that. My takeaway there is that. Right. What's that? That's mad. That's wild. Yeah. So you know the idea that you know through novel surgical approaches you can actually have access to the brain. Okay. And I think now Synchron is implanted in a dozen people, probably, maybe a bit more. So these are things that are happening. It's really incredible. So one of the other challenges we identified in our opportunity space was around invasiveness. Okay. So you might say, well, all right, how about if we want to increase the throughput of technologies and how they're deployed, how about we don't require a full functional neurosurgery team? Okay. Now, the challenge is that technologies that are less invasive, so don't require craniotomy, don't require full functional neurosurgery, generally are less precise. You know, with all the engineers in the room, essentially your kind of sources are further away from your detectors. So we have this kind of trade-off between invasiveness and, for want of a better word, let's say functionality. So what we kind of identified at ARIA was, is it possible to build technologies that really break this trade-off? What can we do there? So we need technologies that are highly targeted and less invasive. So I'll just give you an example of something that I've found in the past few years super inspiring, and that's in focused ultrasound. Okay. So it turns out the neurons in our brain actually have mechanosensitive ion channels, such that when you impinge ultrasound on it, you can actually make them fire. It starts with a cascade, there's calcium, there's a bunch of things involved, but we have this ultrasound response. So that then begs the question, can you do smart engineering of transducers to really get those ultrasound signals deep within the brain? And maybe you don't require invasive brain surgery to do something like deep brain stimulation. Is that possible? Well, the problem is that the human skull is essentially opaque to ultrasound. It's highly lossy and highly scattering. So what you might need to do is really develop, can't see it so well here, but is it possible to develop, for example, a helmet of ultrasound transducers? And if you know through CT scans what the kind of density of the human skull is at various points, could you solve the inverse problem? Okay, the inverse scattering problem, and arrange your transducers such that you can really get to the point in the brain that you want. Okay, potentially a really exciting direction. The third challenge that we identified, and what ended up really being the focus of the program, is the following. There appears to be this mismatch between the tools that we have and the particular conditions that we're trying to address. And that's largely because in the past about 10 years, we've realized that many neurological and neuropsychiatric disorders are really conditions of neural circuits. Okay, so what do I mean by neural circuits? I mean that there are distinct brain regions that are involved. I mean that there's a diversity of cell type. We have excitatory neurons, inhibitory neurons, many other different types of neurons, and there's complex temporal dynamics. So just to give you an example here, this is a kind of cartoon of a circuit which is often involved in motor disorders. It's cortical striatum thalamus cortico circuit. And you can see that there are many different brain regions involved. There are many different cell types, dopaminergic, GABAergic, glutamatergic. And if you speak with someone who is dyskinesia, they're not always dyskinetic. Okay? Sometimes they're more, sometimes they're less. So you have this notion of temporal dynamics. And critically, particularly in neuropsychiatric disorders, what we now think is that these circuits are really distributed around the whole brain. Okay? And there are different circuits for different conditions. So the circuits associated with addiction are going to be different from the circuits associated with depression, for example. So what tools do we have to get at that? Well, our current tools, for example, like DBS, are really coarse-grained. It's like bringing a sledgehammer to the problem. And how can you calculate that? You can just look at the volume of tissue activated by a typical DBS lead and calculate how many neurons are going to be in there. And just back of the envelope, it's probably a region of the brain containing a few million neurons. So, is a few million neurons not a lot or not a lot? Well, in humans, we don't really know because no one's done that yet. But in animal models, it's likely a few dozen neurons is sufficient to modulate behavior if you select which those neurons are. Okay, so we really need much more precise tools. And that was ultimately the goal of our program. How do we build platform neurotechnologies to interface with the human brain at the same scale as some of the most common and complex neurological and neuropsychiatric disorders? And what we're calling these is Precision Neurotechnologies. So, okay, one equation. When you're designing a program, what you really want to do is be able to quantify whether you're going to be successful or not. So what we did was say, can we quantify how well a particular technology interfaces with neural circuits? So we came up with this notion of precision. Okay, so precision really captures the essence of what we think is important in circuits. Can we get to cell type specificity? Can you selectively modulate or read out from excitatory neurons versus inhibitory neurons, or many other different types of neurons? What is the volume of interaction? How big is the voxel size? Can we target specific circuit elements with our technology? The field of view, how much of the brain can we access? Particularly for psychiatric disorders, we believe that many of these conditions are distributed across the brain. Can we make sure we can access all those different regions? And finally, voxel number. How many different handholds do we have to really try and modulate and read out from the brain? So what you can do is really map out our current state-of-the-art technologies. We've done that and we've kind of calculated this, and you can draw what's called a Pareto frontier. And that tells you what the current state-of-the-art is. And our goal here at ARIA is really to push that frontier forward by at least an order of magnitude along these different directions. So what I think for me is really exciting about this is that we don't necessarily know what the technologies are going to look like. We know what we want to do, but we don't know what it's going to look like. Okay. So just to kind of give some inspiration, here's a couple of technologies that I've been really inspired with over the past few years that kind of blew my mind. And I just want to share them a bit because I don't know if folks are going to be so familiar with that. And we think there's a huge potential to really get this circuit level access if we look at the intersection of both engineered hardware and engineered biology. So on the hardware side, there's some really interesting work looking at functionalization of bioelectronics. Okay, we're familiar with the idea, companies like Neuralink, that you can put electrodes in, record or simulate from different regions. But how do we get cell type specificity? Turns out what you can do is actually functionalize the surface of these things with peptides and antibodies such that they target specific surface receptors on different cell types. And that allows you to record and modulate specifically from those particular cell types. So that's more on the kind of engineering side. Another one which I've been really inspired by is this idea of living electrodes. So one of the challenges with conventional electrode systems, if you implant a rigid silicon electrode into the brain, there is this mismatch in mechanical properties between the brain, which is a big bag of jelly, and this hard silicon metal electrode. And that causes scarring, that causes immune responses. There are many challenges associated with that. How about instead we use a biological system as our electrode? So it turns out what you can do is you can grow stem cell-derived neurons and get them to express either an activity indicator for readout or an opsin for control. And you can implant these into live brains. And these neurons will actually innovate and synapse onto healthy neurons. And that means you can actually read out activity and modulate activity deep within the brain. So the final one is in the gene therapy space. So typically when we think about gene therapies for neuroscience, many people might think about things like optogenetics. And optogenetics allows you to potentially modulate different brain regions using light. An area which I've been really excited by in the past few years are these activity-dependent gene therapies. So in epilepsy, often what you see is this kind of big increase in excitation, and that starts the seizure kind of propagating. So what this team have done is developed an activity-dependent gene therapy that when it senses this increase in activity through CFOS, it essentially upregulates potassium channels only in those neurons, which essentially put the brake and essentially start inhibiting those neurons. So it's a way to actually stop the seizure before it starts propagating. Okay. So the reason I put these up is because on the face of it, you might not think of these as neurotechnologies, but I really want to get across that neurotechnologies should be understood as broadly as possible. Okay, so the ultimate vision for the program is really to develop these breakthrough technologies to build advances in disease understanding and diagnosis, ultimately identify new kinds of therapeutic targets, and build personalized treatments which minimize off-target effects and are really account for disease heterogeneity, which is one of the big challenges at the moment, and are really tailored to the individual. So that's everything on the science side. I'm now going to hand it over to Gillian to talk about how you folks can get involved.
Awesome. So now that Jacques has gotten you guys super excited about neurotechnology and how it could potentially be relevant to all of you guys in this room with your diverse backgrounds, I'm going to talk about how you guys can get involved. So at ARIA, we're being very thoughtful about how to get different people at different stages of their career involved in neurotechnology development in the UK to really develop the ecosystem. One of the first opportunities that we want to talk about today is our seeds call that Jacques was referencing before. So we've developed the program, which has just closed and we're in the process of reviewing, but we're going to be opening our seeds call very soon. And that seeds call basically funds between 10 and 500K to explore the opportunity space as a whole. So Jacques kind of detailed the opportunity space and then the program. This seeds call is relevant to the wider opportunity space. And the goal here is it's a really short application. It's only 3 pages, and you'll have an answer from us within 3 weeks. So it's a very, very short time frame. And the idea is to spark new ideas, which might become future programs or projects. And to really, as Jacques was saying before, one of the goals of ARIA is to go for really, really bold, high-risk projects. And so with these smaller grants compared to the larger program, we're really looking for any bold idea that an undergrad, a PhD, a postdoc, an advanced professor, someone from a completely different field, we're really open to all the different applications and ideas that you guys might come up with, because we really do believe that to address these complex problems that Jacques has set out, we need a diversity of thought and backgrounds. And so, yeah, we want bold, high-risk reward ideas. It can't be something that's a straightforward extension of work that you've already done or someone else has already done. It really has to be something new. And we would really love to see ideas from students and early career researchers. So this is one of the reasons why we've come to talk to you tonight. It's to really make you guys realize that this is something that's available to undergrads, postdocs, PhDs, everyone alike. And we really want to encourage you guys to apply and think creatively around the opportunity space that Jacques detailed. So some examples of applications that you might want to put in are, for example, applying tools and techniques from one field into another. So let's say you study physics and you don't know that much about the brain or neuroscience, but you know that there are some really cool tools that you've applied in physics, and you want to come in and try and apply them to the brain. That would be a perfect type of opportunity seed that we would love to consider. Other options can be if you just want to purchase a license to investigate some multi-physics simulations as an undergrad or PhD, postdoc, whatever. That's also something we would be willing to fund, as long as you detail what you would want to use that tool for, and it's addressing a novel question. Another example could be building a prototype of a completely new technology just to get to the point of feasibility and proof of concept, which would potentially allow you guys to ask for further funding afterwards. So yeah, this call is really meant to be quite broad, both in the audience and in the types of technologies we'd want to fund. Other opportunities that we have at ARIA, there are going to be more in the future, so definitely please follow us. Also, feel free to take a picture of the screen, because I know that there's a lot of QR codes on here, but they are all very worthwhile investigating. So the first one, and yeah, to be very clear, we have a lot of different partners at ARIA, and all of them we're calling them our activation partners, and they're here to help us and you guys grow the community within the UK. And so for this specific opportunity space, it's for growing neurotechnologies, but those other opportunity spaces that Jacques detailed before are also working with these partners. And so there's 3 current opportunities that are going to be opening within the next couple months that we want to highlight for you, but this is not an exhaustive list. So once again, please give all of them a follow, give ARIA a follow, and stay up to date with what those different things are. The first one is Cambridge University Health Partners. And so we're really excited about this because they're actually specific to neurotechnologies. And they're based in Cambridge, as the name kind of gives away. And they've got 2 fellowships that are running and an ecosystem program. So the first fellowship is for someone that doesn't necessarily have a specific technology in mind, but really knows that they want to work on neurotech innovation, and they want to dedicate a year of their life to trying to come up with a new technology with the support of the Cambridge University Health Partners, which are a mix of businessmen, there's the NHS is involved, there's clinicians, there's engineers, there's like a really wide background to help support idea creation. And so the first fellowship is around rapid iteration for that type of an individual. The second type of fellowship is called Activator Fellows. And that's geared towards someone that might actually already have a technology. They already have an initial proof of concept or some sort of data, and they just really need help and support to move that idea forward so that then they could apply for further funding from ARIA or other funding bodies. And so that one is called the Activator Fellows. And it's also run by Cambridge University Health Partners. And then the third is an ecosystem program. And that's something that really everyone can and should be a part of. And the idea there is just running a lot of events to get interdisciplinary collaborations running and going, and just conversations between, you know, neuroscientists and physicists and engineers and philosophers and ethicists and everyone. And so they're going to be running a bunch of events around neurotechnology in Cambridge, and then they're also going to do a roadshow around the UK. So definitely, you know, once again, I'm plugging them, but like give them a follow. And if you see that they're coming near you, really worth a visit. Then the 2 next activation partners, one of them is Pillar VC, which is, as the name kind of gives away, a venture capital company, but they are very specialized, and they've partnered with ARIA around artificial intelligence. So this fellowship is really geared towards people that have an AI or ML background, but want to apply that background to science problems, including neurotechnology. And they're going to be giving 30 top researchers the opportunity to go and be in leading science labs across the UK and really like immerse themselves with what the problems in different areas of science are, and then see if they can apply their AI or ML backgrounds to solve those problems. And they're also running a bunch of really cool events to bring different communities together as well. And then the last one is Convergent Research. This is really exciting. So they developed something called Focused Research Organizations. Please raise your hand if you know what that is. Okay. Because it's a minority, I'm going to walk through it really quickly. But these are basically really, really cool structures where scientists want to answer a question that would be really impactful. And academic grants aren't quite big enough to be able to address those problems. And it's also something that requires a lot of dedication from a team that's kind of full-time going to be thinking about it. So it needs to operate kind of like a startup and be able to raise funds and have a dedicated team like a startup. But it's not geared towards commercialization or making money. It's really geared towards addressing some underlying scientific questions or developing really useful tools for the science community in general. And Convergent Research is based in Boston, and their expertise is helping people set these organizations up. So some of these have already been set up in the US, but we're really looking forward to working with them as a partner, and they're actually going to start helping us open FROs in the UK. So we're so excited about that. And they're running a fellowship to set up these FROs. So it's not live yet, but once again, the QR code will bring you to the relevant information where you can follow the correct things. And what we're really excited about in our team is that at least one of these focused research organizations will be funded in our opportunity space. So yeah, definitely give that one a follow too. And then that's it from us, but obviously we would love to hear from you. This is just the start of what we're doing to grow this technology space in the UK. So give us a follow, reach out. We're always keen to hear ideas, or if you have any questions, yeah, definitely please reach out. And I'm going to say it one last time, follow.